Assalamualaikum and greetings. My name is Nur Fadhila binti Ahmad, and I'll be speaking about a comparative analysis of impoliteness strategies in a talk show by Nabil Ahmad and James Corden. So we move on to research background. This studies was related to the previous studies by Culpeper 1996 and also Culpeper 2005, which the Culpeper 1996 defined impoliteness as a model to deem a better explanation to make the strategies considered universal across different cultures, promote social harmony among society. And the 1996 model is related to the fundamental knowledge for the Culpeper 2005 studies, which is the impoliteness in reality TV shows, RTV. And it is related to these previous studies, which is the core problem of impoliteness among the local TV talk show hosts is their misconception of being funny or humorous as the offensive speech. As for theory, for these studies, Mir Hosseini says that Culpeper 2005 claimed that impoliteness is not a form of theory and it does not involve the sense of predictive power. Therefore, it was considered as a form of model instead of theory. And it is being proposed by related to the concept of face obtained from Goffman 1967 studies, which is highly associated with the idea of or belief of losing face of or being impeded by the listener or the speakers. And it is related to Brown and Levinson concept or notion of face. Brown and Levinson 1987 says that the negative face is the notion of an adult to prevent themselves from being impeded, while the positive face is their desire to be accepted as part of the society or being wanted to be included by others. As for the concept, it shows that Culpeper 1996 suggested that the inherent activity is different from the virtual or potential offense, which could be explained as the action was considered offensive and it does not conform to politeness. But then he says that it depends on the social norm. If the behavior is an acceptable norm among the cultures, such as burping, the action was not considered as impolite, as it is being accepted by the group of the society itself. And the act of impoliteness is parallel to the relationship between the action involved and the cultural setting itself. And the result often coerces speech that the addressee is an unavoidable imposition that might cause damage to the positive face. And this is the explanation for the impoliteness model, which is the convention of how it could be considered as bound on record, positive impoliteness, negative impoliteness, off-record impoliteness, and withhold politeness, also sarcasm or mock politeness. When you are speaking directly without any implication, and the FTA is being very clear, it was known as bulk on record strategy. While if you are neglecting, you are avoiding, you are using the language that the listener hardly understood, and you causing the listener to feel tense, uncomfortable, and you calling the other names, it is known as positive impoliteness. While for negative impoliteness, when you cause the listener to feel scared by frightening them, mocking, ridiculing, you being rude or contemptuous, you are not being serious, you inviting their space, and also the negative aspect, and you infringe the conversational structure, that is what is known as negative impoliteness. As for off-record impoliteness, is the typical politeness from the interlocutors is absent. For example, when you forgot to say thank you or greet someone. And for withhold politeness is to perform a very subtle imposition, but the intention of the speech is delivered. And for sarcasm or mock impoliteness, the FTA is performed using politeness strategies that are insincere and it remains surface realizations. For the problem statement, it is related back to Culpeper 1996 studies on RTV. The present study's core problem is the misconception of humor or jokes despite being a very offensive speech, and it is related to the impoliteness model. The objectives of these studies is to study the types of impoliteness strategies, to identify the most and least frequent impoliteness strategies, and also to identify the cultural elements could be found from Nabil Ahmad and James Corden TV talk shows. For the research methodology, the research design is for the study is a qualitative approach, and it is used to describe a specific pragmatic phenomenon, namely impoliteness, using Culpeper 2005 model of impoliteness as a theoretical framework. And the qualitative approach is selected as the data gathering procedure involve content analysis, which is the data will be later transcribed and will be examined to include the features of the impoliteness model. And for the sample is non-probability sampling, which is the purposive sampling. It is being used as the most appropriate method as it involves a selective method, which is you are selecting the individuals or units for a specific goal of the research, and it shares a similar characteristic or specific traits. And in this case, for James Corden and Nabil Ahmad, both are male and both has a background as stand-up comedian and both are TV hosts, TV talk show hosts. So there is 8 videos being gathered for each of the sample, 8 for Nabil Ahmad and also 8 for James Corden. And how to determine the 8 as a perfect number is by having the saturation of data. The saturation of data achieved after watching 3 videos from both of the samples, and there is no additional information acquired after watching the third video for both samples. And for the data collection, it consists of the 2 shows, which is the Meletop for Nabil Ahmad and the Late Night shows with James Corden for James Corden. And roughly for each data has 10 minutes of duration, and it has been gathered from their respective YouTube channels, which is Meletop for Nabil Ahmad and the Late Show for James Corden. And for the data, it has been transcribed into a broad transcription through the video analysis method, and the contents of transcriptions were being analyzed or examined using the theoretical framework and tabulated accordingly. As well as for data analysis procedures, the collected data will undergo a transcribing process to have the layout of the speech, and the content analysis method to recognize the impoliteness strategies from the impoliteness model of Culpeper 1996, and it will be coded and tabulated accordingly. And the findings will be further analyzed and discussed to study the intensity of impoliteness and the cultural elements exhibit in their respective utterances. As a result, we could see that in this case, the withhold impoliteness is absent for Nabil Ahmad as well as James Corden, as both are delivered voluntarily and they know what they tried to say, and most of the occasion did not indicate the withhold politeness. As the population of data, the data was taken randomly in the form of video clip instead of full video. So it is absent as they did not obey the turn-taking system, and there are many instances of interruption happen between the interlocutors. So for the comparison between Nabil Ahmad and James Corden, we could see that Nabil Ahmad is being more impolite compared to James Corden, and both of the hosts sharing the same numbers of positive impoliteness strategies as they perform as the most frequent impoliteness strategies. And for the studies, there is a mistake for the table number and also the title. It was supposed to be but on record impoliteness strategies between Nabil Ahmad and James Corden, we could see that Nabil Ahmad performed more but on record strategies compared to James Corden. And it could say that it is related to the off-record impoliteness strategies. For the off-record impoliteness strategies, again, Nabil Ahmad is performed higher than James Corden. And in Malay culture, the but on record strategies is highly associated with indirectly saying something compared to say it directly. And in this case, you could see that Nabil Ahmad is performing but on record impoliteness by making fun of the guest's physical appearances. And in Western culture, it shows that it's just fine to use but on record strategies. And James Corden performed but on record impoliteness strategies in order to be direct with his guests, in order to express his emotions. And it is related to Culpeper 1996 theories, which is a social relationship, which is when someone is being closer to each other, they find that impoliteness is unimportant. Politeness is unimportant and unnecessary between them. It shows that the but on record strategy mainly exists when the individual has a freedom of speech and clear social relationship. And here we could see that James Corden used the but on record strategy to bluntly express his emotion by directly calling his guests as an idiot, and he seemed dissatisfied with his guests. And for this case, but on record strategy is considered as a medium to deliver direct speech with saturated emotion. For the positive impoliteness strategies, we could see that both of the hosts has the same number of positive impoliteness strategies but differences in the sub-strategies. We could see that James Corden are using profanity language, which is the unique part of these studies. For these studies, we could see that profanity language is supposed to be categorized as impoliteness strategies. But then, it could say that in American culture, profanity and taboo words seems to be expected in most of the conversation. And even J et al. Says that emphatic swearing were used to promote social harmony by using it as intensifier, either to compliment someone. And it used that in this case, James Corden were using profanities to show that he appreciates his guest's opinion. And the profanity is used to show positive emotion instead of negative emotion. And it's different from Nabil Ahmad any profanity language, as it is related to Malaysian polite communication, which does not include swearing in their high culture context, and it violates the social cultural aspect of the multi-ethnic cultural values among the nation. And for the negative impoliteness strategies, it could see that generally being used is to ridicule. It is highly used. Either Nabil Ahmad and James Corden, both of them ridiculing their guests, is mostly to make fun of the listener. But then in this particular occasion, it doesn't mean to degrade the listener, but most of the time it is used to make the situation much more lighter and entertaining. And we could see that both of the guests are using the same number of invading their guest space, as the format of TV talk show often occur when the unfamiliar person being asked for information that is considered intimate by considering their relationship. And that's the purpose of TV talk show, as they need to ask their guests personal issues or their progress, and somehow related to this invading their space. And it could be seen that Nabil Ahmad performed more negative impoliteness strategies compared to James Corden, and it is approved by Wibowo and Kunjara studies, which suggested that negative impoliteness is a part of the Eastern culture norms. As for conclusion, we could see that positive impoliteness strategies are the most frequently used strategy for these two hosts, and it shows that there are different phases of usage of profanity language. For James Corden, profanity is to use either to express his anger as well as compliment, but then profanity is not acceptable in Malaysia and it will be censored as it is considered as taboo. Although Malay culture considered berkias as a part of their high cultural value or high culture context, it is being shown in the studies that the elements of indirect speech are highly used as the off-record impoliteness strategies in Nabil Ahmad's data. It shows that being indirect does not mean to be utterly polite, as somehow the speech itself leads to FTA, and it shows that impoliteness needs to be more precisely defined by relating back to the specific culture and also specific context of the speech. And the finding could provide a better insight and helpful for the host to be more aware of their content and also their speech, and knowing what has been normalized in our culture such as indirect speech, we significantly gave the listeners a good impact which might differently perceived from the real intention of the speaker. And more of the studies need to be carried out to explore the impoliteness strategies involve spoken discourse context. And a minimal number of studies contribute to this aspect, especially for the Malaysian TV program. And the TV presenter and the host need to have a good skills to understand the critical aspect of FTA concept and having a borderline between what's being considered as impolite and also what could be considered as humorous. Therefore, further studies need to be carried out to provide a solution to what needs to be used while hosting a TV talk show. Therefore, it could be reflected the impoliteness aspect of spoken discourse in terms of the context of the speech. Thank you.